In this video, I want to explain to you what heart failure is and what approaches can be adopted pharmacologically to treating heart failure. Heart failure is where the heart is unable to meet the demands of the body. The purpose of the heart, of course, is to ensure that an adequate blood supply reaches all the parts of the body. The heart itself is a double pump system with the input coming in from the body here, that is then pumped up from the left side through the lungs where gaseous exchange occurs, and then back through the second pump coming out on the right hand side. So there are two ways in which the heart might not be able to meet demand. One is if there's too much blood coming in and it's not able to clear it. So this is what we call the preload. Alternatively, it might also be affected by having too much of a resistance here, causing a back pressure. And this is called the afterload. So in a way, the heart is a bit like a worker on a production line with the conveyor belt running mercilessly in one direction, with each worker here trying to deal with a preload and the afterload, which is any backup we have further on. If the worker is unable to work fast enough because their output is less than what's needed to deal with the preload and the afterload, then we get a backup. How does that happen in the heart? Well, if we find that the heart is unable to produce its output, let's think about what's going to happen. So this is the heart. Let's simplify the diagram very much indeed. Let's ignore that it's a dual pump. What's going to happen is that if cardiac output goes down, then blood pressure will go down as well. So cardiac output has decreased because the heart is not able to keep up with the demand, so that it leads to a fall in blood pressure, and then in the kidneys this is detected as a fall in the blood pressure, and that results in an attempt by the negative feedback systems to restore blood pressure. So what they do is you then get, through the angiotensin and renin system, you end up with an increase in norepinephrine. And that then causes an increase in the afterload. But this is exactly what our problem was in the first place, and so that causes a fall in cardiac output because there's more blood pushing back because of our blood pressure's gone up, And so this results in falling cardiac output further still, so we now get more, and so the cycle goes on until eventually things get worse and worse and worse, and you end up then with heart failure. So how can we stop this from happening? There are three ways in which you can control this. You can try to make the heart stronger. So that's making this worker here just work a little bit faster, give them a bit more energy. You can slow down the input, which is decreasing the preload, or you can reduce the back pressure, which is decreasing the afterload. So let's look at that in the context of the heart. We can either increase cardiac output, or the force of contraction, or we can decrease the preload and the afterload. How can we actually do that? There are several ways you can do that. One way is to decrease the afterload by making the vessels bigger. Things flow much more quickly through a large vessel compared to flowing through a small vessel. So what you can do is to add drugs called vasodilators, which increase the diameter of the blood vessels in the body. And that's a bit like widening these roads. So now, instead of going slowly down the road, you've got a nice wide road, and you can then travel much more quickly. This decreases the pressure, and that solves the problem of cardiac output going down, low blood pressure in the periphery, norepinephrine, increasing the afterload. Vasodilators decrease the afterload and break this cycle. Another thing you can do is try to increase the force of contraction, and that can be done using drugs like digoxin, which are isolated originally from digitalis, which is the common foxglove. How does that work? Let's go back to our whiteboard and see. Cardiac myocytes, so this is a cardiac muscle cell, have a sodium potassium pump which extrudes sodium and pumps potassium in, just like in neurons. Digoxin inhibits this pump, and the result is a build-up of sodium inside the cell. This build-up of sodium activates, or rather drives, a doesn't drive, it affects another pump, which is the sodium calcium exchanger. Normally, the sodium calcium exchanger uses the diffusion gradient of sodium to pump calcium out of the cell. But there's a problem, because we now have a build-up of sodium inside the cell. So this diffusion gradient here is decreased. So there's less of a force to push the calcium out. So the result is a build-up of calcium as well inside the cell. And it's that calcium which regulates the interaction between actin and myosin in the heart muscle. This rise in intracellular calcium means you get a stronger force. Of contraction. So then what digoxin is doing is increasing intracellular sodium. That causes a build-up of intracellular calcium, and that causes a stronger output in the heart. Another thing we can do, if our problem is that we're getting a backup of blood in the system, which is a part of heart failure and a result of heart failure, because it's this vicious cycle, another thing we can do is just decrease the amount of traffic in the system by getting some of the traffic to leave the system. And that's how diuretics work. Diuretics cause loss of fluid from the kidneys. So it's causing you to lose water from the system, and that effectively reduces the build-up in the blood vessels. And so, if we go back to our original vicious circle, cardiac output causes a fall of renal blood pressure. That causes the angiotensin system to increase noradrenaline. That causes an increase in afterload. And that, etc. Again, diuretics are decreasing the afterload and breaking the vicious circle. So then what have we learned? We've learned that heart failure is a situation where the heart cannot meet the demands of the body. It's caused by either too much preload, too much afterload, or a loss of power from the heart. And we have this vicious cycle that we need to break. We break the vicious cycle either by strengthening the heart with digoxin, which is made from digoxin, or we can decrease the back pressure by reducing the blood pressure or increasing the vessel diameter.